Well, welcome, Amanda Love, to the Deep Life podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are really excited to dive deep into all holistic health because you are a holistic nutritionist, and that is so near and dear to my heart because I am as well. But for our listeners who are unfamiliar with Amanda, can you please give us a little bit of background on how your journey began, how you became certified? I mean, you're the host of your very own podcast as well, where you dive deep into all sorts of health issues and food. So let's kind of get an idea of who Amanda is for our listeners.
Yeah, so that's a very detailed answer.
We like that. That's why our show is called The Deep Life. We like to go deep.
I like that because, my story is that I was actually born 6 weeks early. I grew up and I just was sick all the time, and they just didn't know what was going on with me. Sinus infections, immune issues, sore. Once in a while, I would run fevers, and they just didn't know. And also during that time, my parents divorced when I was 6. My dad remarried when I was 8 years old. And I would go over to my dad's house, and there was a lot of emotional abuse as a child. And so there was a lot going on with that. The courts got involved that last year before I turned 14 years old. So there was a lot of that going on, which I tell people I feel like trauma plays a big part in your health issues.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because we feel exact same. My parents divorced before I was 1.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, I didn't realize the trauma until I was a teenager.
Yeah. And I haven't, and I just recently this year haven't been like, okay, I'm like, I got to deal with this trauma stuff, which I thought I had healed from, but I really hadn't from. So I think that's the thing too. Is sometimes your trauma gets pushed to the front where you're like, oh, I got to focus on that. And 100%. It's not always the nutrition.
Yeah.
But my thing was we moved out of California to Arizona, and I still was getting sick, but it was every 4 to 6 weeks. And the thing was I ended up getting held back because I had struggled with school and stuff like that also. So nothing was ever easy in my life. And so that's the thing I tell people. Once I graduated out of high school and I completed a personal training program, 6 months course, I completed that. 2 weeks later, I turned 20 and I was so much pain. I was so fatigued. I couldn't take a shower and I was so exhausted.
Wow.
And I stopped going to the gym. I was taking 2-hour naps. I never felt well rested. And 10 minutes later, they diagnosed me with fibromyalgia at 20 years old. And this is coming up on 12 years. I'm 32.
That is crazy. Yeah. Wow. There's so much to unpack there. And it's really interesting. When all of the symptoms, were going on, when you said as a baby, you were having, sinus infections, lots of fever, sick, and even into your teenage years, what was going through your mind and your parents' mind? And what were the doctors doing? Because I'm so curious, holistically, we take a very natural approach.
Right.
But Dan and I were never like this way. We didn't grow up that way. Our parents are very, I want to say, conventional, where they listen to Western doctors. Yeah. And as I understand that, because that's, how society, media has told us to do it. But what was your experience like that? Were you in how did you deal with all of that?
So I was raised by my mom and my grandma, and my grandma actually had done nursing, but we would just go to the conventional doctors, and the conventional doctors were like, well, your blood work looks normal. You're normal. And I think just because you're not overweight or you look healthy on the outside does not mean you're healthy. And I think that's a big thing that people need to realize is that.
Yes, we talk about that constantly.
Yeah, it's all those things are, we were actually having this conversation yesterday about obesity. You mentioned if you're not overweight, where a lot of times people want to say obesity is a cause of disease. And I think they have that kind of paradigm all wrong, where I feel like it's just another symptom.
Yeah.
The underlying issue and the underlying disease, where if we're not changing our lifestyle and we're living a lifestyle that's causing disease, it's going to show up in different ways for different people. And for some people it's pain, for some people it's like headaches, asthma, or it could be obesity and carrying extra body weight. But it's all, I feel like, all just symptoms of the same kind of lifestyle issues. I'm kind of curious if you agree and you think we're onto something there.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, and I think that's the thing. It's a lot of times I think people are like, well, if you're not overweight, then you should be healthy. And it's just like, no, I think a lot with health issues, everything plays a part. I tell people, what's your relationships? What's your stress? What's your trauma? And it's not always about the food, even though I'm huge about the food and stuff like that. But it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
Everything's connected.
Yeah,
yes.
It's never just one thing, no matter what you're trying to figure out or solve. So I think everything is so deeply connected to everything else.
Yeah. And I think that when Dan and I began coaching people, and I don't know if you feel the same way, when we began maybe 3 years ago, it was all about, workouts and meal prep, meal planning, and we can get the results for people. But the more clients that we took on and the more challenging, clients that we took on, it was at the point where people stopped getting results after the initial couple weeks because they had a lot of other things going on. Their marriages were in turmoil, or they had childhood trauma that they didn't know that they had. They were breathing improperly, or people weren't getting enough sleep. And that's where we really dove deep, and Dan got his holistic certification, because we realized it's never just one thing. You can fix one thing with diet and exercise, of course, but if your mindset isn't correct, and if you're talking to yourself internally horribly, like your body listens to that, of course, it's not going to respond in a positive manner. It's going to manifest as disease. So I'm really curious how once you received that diagnosis of fibromyalgia, what was going through your head? Was it a relief that you had this diagnosis and that you could work with it? Tell us kind of what happened after that, where you went from there after that initial diagnosis.
Yeah, I get that question, and it's been 12 years, but I think I felt a sense of relief that I had something, because growing up, everybody believes the medical doctors are going to make you feel better. That's the whole belief. And they told my grandmother, well, while I was out of the room, they're like, well, she's probably depressed. And of course I was probably depressed. The two suggestions they were told were, they were like, she should take some medication. And if you look up this medication now, and there's a good website, drugs.com, where you can look up medications, and it will tell you the side effects and all of that. And it was Cymbalta, and the other medication that people usually take for fibromyalgia is Lyrica.
Yeah.
But it has side effects. And my grandmother was like, you are not staying on this. And it's actually, if you look it up, it's an antidepressant.
Oh, wow.
And at 20 years old, they're putting you on that.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen the commercials for it. Obviously, they're inundated, but I didn't realize that it's technically an antidepressant. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing they told my grandmother, they were like, well, she should do physical therapy. So I did physical therapy. I did the swimming. I did the weight training. It's interesting now to look back on it, because I think it's sort of funny, because I actually had done that personal training program probably 10, 11 months before. And I just come out and I was just crying. I was in so much pain.
Wow.
And nothing was relieving the pain. My energy was horrid. And I was just like, what's going on? And right next door, there was a pain management place. So I had a consultation with the pain management people. They're like, you're going to have 3 treatments. And what they did was they would take your weight, they take your blood pressure, but you would have to wear a hospital band. They would draw little circles on your back. And then they would shoot this huge needle into all the trigger points. So
Wow.
yeah, 14 of the 18 trigger points is usually what they do with fibromyalgia. And I would just come out and I would just cry because I was in so much pain. And they would have at the end, they would always have you have cookies and juice, which is telling you something right there where it's to raise that blood sugar back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I only did 2 of the 3 treatments.
Did that seem to help at all, or was it?
No, it was supposed to help with like pain and stuff, and it didn't do anything. Like it did nothing for me.
Oh.
But I think that's the thing is like when you go from place to place, and this was next to the physical therapy place, so we wouldn't have even known about it if it wasn't next to the physical therapy place. And we asked the rheumatology place, which wasn't in the same shopping area, but we asked them and they're like, well, yeah, sure, you could try that. So of course you're going to try anything to get your granddaughter better. And that's what my grandma did.
Wow. And so young too. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you mentioned the cookies and the juices. I mean, it blows my mind in hospitals that they're giving patients that. I mean, that's a whole nother thing, which we can dive into. But as your journey progressed and things weren't working for you, at this point, you're still a teenager, right? You're young.
Yeah, I was young. I was only 20, almost 21 at that time.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's so young.
That's so
young. I feel young. And I just turned 30. I think I turned 35. I can't even remember.
Like
but as a 20-year-old, I mean, I didn't know any of this. I was inundated. I had an eating disorder at that time. That's like, obviously from childhood trauma. That's how it manifested in me. Tell us kind of how you incorporated food, because, food is medicine. I learned this later in life, but when do those light bulbs go off in your head? Were you just kind of experimenting and keeping on doing certain treatments or things? How did food come into it for you?
So for me, like I always loved food and like I loved nutrition. So I always somehow knew that there was a reason for why nutrition played such a big part and stuff. I watched a show called The Biggest Loser, and they were all about fitness, all about nutrition. And I feel like that sort of started me off on that journey. And I wanted to do nutrition after I did the personal training program, because I was like, I love nutrition. And I only got like 100 hours when I did the personal training thing. And I also loved taking the nutrition. Like in high school, we had to take nutrition and PE. So we had that. And I loved like the nutrition part. I didn't like the PE part just because I'm horrible at sports. But my grandmother found a wellness chiropractor 10 minutes away, said wellness talk. She went to his talk. I couldn't go to it. And he said, oh, if your granddaughter is only 20 and she has fibromyalgia, she's been very, very sick for a very long time. And that's when a light bulb went off in my grandmother's head. And she's like, he really gets it. So he tested me for stool testing, saliva testing. I found out I had 2 genes that predisposed me to a gluten sensitivity, highest practice at the time. Both parents gave me that, a soy sensitivity, egg sensitivity, and dairy sensitivity. And that was 11 years ago.
Wow. Okay. So you at least got some answers then. That a blessing that wellness center was there and that doctor had use common sense, but at least awareness is a better word to do.
So would you say like your progression of health? So, going from, being young and having, some issues. And as you got older, they kind of got worse and worse.
Yeah.
Until it culminated in being in the diagnosis of fibromyalgia.
Yeah, I would say it got worse and stuff, but it was pretty bad just all the way up to my early 20s and stuff.
Yeah. So once you receive, this information overload of how food is really affecting your health and to, cut away soy, dairy, gluten. I mean, we resonate with all those things. We never got tested for any of them, but just like intuitively, as we coached people, we did elimination diets because we need to understand how to coach people and when you cut out things, how they feel. And, we cut out gluten immediately, and I could not, this was 5 or 6 years ago. I couldn't believe the immense, like it changed my life when I cut gluten out. I mean, really, I tell that to all of our clients, like that's one of the first things we try to eliminate from their diet, that and soy for sure.
Yeah.
For some reason, I do really well on dairy. We do really well. We cut it out. And again, that's just because everybody's different. But once you began eliminating these foods, was it helping you? Did you feel like the symptoms were alleviating? Kind of get deep into that, how once you changing your diet.
I started to feel better, and like, I think my energy improved, and I wasn't getting headaches. And I think a lot of times I feel like people are like, well, I don't want to give up this food, but like, it's okay because you're going to feel so much better without that food. And that's the thing.
We try to, we try to tell our clients, you really don't know how badly you feel until you cut away and eliminate these toxic foods, vegetable oils, processed sugars and things. But it is, and it's challenging. I don't know if you feel the same way about your clients, but a lot of people, they don't want to give up those comfort foods. Never. And when I say comfort foods, I don't mean like mashed potatoes and like meatloaf. I mean like their ice cream after dinner, or their wine with dinner, or their Cheerios for breakfast, because doctors told me this is heart healthy. So we find ourselves having that challenge to educate our clients, but where you're such a big advocate of this, and you literally are living proof of how food is medicine. Tell us kind of how you kind of advocate that to your clients, and even probably your friends and family and the circle of people that you have surrounding you.
Yeah, I advocate that, like, you want to live your life for everybody around you, and you want to be the best version of you possible. And like, I tell people, like, I didn't know that I would have 2 nieces. I have a niece who's 4 months, and I have a niece who's turning 3 this week. So, and I visited them recently in Arizona. If I hadn't gone in well, like, I wouldn't have been able to play with them and hold them. So that for me is like, okay, you want to feed your body well. You want to be able to do the things you want to do. You don't want to be in pain. You don't want to be on the couch. You don't want to not be taking it. Like, I couldn't even take a shower. Like, that, it was so painful. Wearing a bra, like, I don't even think I did that for like a year because of the bra straps and like just stuff like that. You don't want to take your health for, like, you don't want to take your health for advantage and not like take care of it. And because I feel like if your health is bad, then everything else is going to be off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can never be your fullest expression if you're in pain and you're kind of worn down.
And food has such a big impact because there is such a connection. It's the gut-mind connection where when you feed your gut, because your gut is literally so intelligent. It's speaking to every other portion of your body and all your other organs, especially, most importantly, your brain. And the importance of, obviously we're around the same age, but we grew up, in the 90s where everything fat-free everything. And that is like, it's devoiding of nutrients. You're literally removing the nutrients out of milks and cheeses and, any other processed packaged food. And people really, I think they're catching up and waking up to the aspect of, oh, wait a minute, we need that for our brain health.
Right.
But it's such a nuance almost in a way. But I want to talk a little bit more about how you got you must have fallen in love, obviously, with nutrition, like you said, because you ended up getting your nutrition certification. So kind of tell us how that came about, and then how you began, taking on clients. Were you specifically taking on, women or men that had fibromyalgia? Like, get a little bit into that.
Yeah. So for me, I was like, I want to go into nutrition. So while I was going to that wellness chiropractor, I was starting to feel better. And I was like, okay, I'll do health coaching. And I did that. But I just was like, that was great. But I don't feel like that was teaching me, okay, how to really do a good health history. Let's learn about like the immune system. How does your digestive system work? Like, and then there was a lot of like other subjects that I learned about and stuff like that, because I feel like people think with nutrition is a black and white subject. And I'm like, we're all individuals. What works for my 32-year-old body is not going to work for you. Like my sister's nursing and she's 30. Like she
Oh
needs
yeah,
different things. We all
totally different. Her
yeah,
hormones are all different.
we all need different things and stuff like that. And like, so that's the thing why I think we get pushed in this world that one thing's gonna work for everybody and it's not. And one of the good books I recommend people to read is all about, it's called by, I think it's Michael Pollan, and it's Fat, Salt, Sugar.
Yes, yes, yes. Love Michael Pollan. Yes.
Yeah, because I think that book gives you a good history of like what the companies do to market the food that we so
Yeah.
desperately crave.
And it's so sad. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
That Dan kind of dove deep into that. I would say he was the pioneer on this holistic journey. And he
Yeah.
would tell me like, read these books, do this. Cause he would say things to me. And like we were talking at the beginning of the podcast, I kind of was indoctrinated from like my parents and just listening to doctors. I would like think he was crazy. And then he would show me these studies on the fabrications, how like the companies are paid specifically by like the pharmaceutical companies. And I was like, oh my God, like I couldn't believe it. And this is why we do what we do, because it's so important to relay this message to other people. It's not that we're trying to make anyone feel bad for the way that they've chosen to eat, because we chose to eat this way up until very recently. And we just know how much better we feel. And I can feel that coming from you, that it's like, we want everybody to feel this way. We want everybody to live their best life. I mean, our bodies want to be healthy and vital. They don't want to be, like you said, they don't want to be in pain and sluggish.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. Your body wants to be healthy. And I feel like people don't think that. I was just interviewing someone for my podcast and he was talking about like your body's, it's born to be healthy and it's not born to be sick. And we got it. And I feel like that's what we got mixed up right now, is that we feel like we should be sick or we're always going to be sick. And that's not true.
I think, yeah, we're very brainwashed and kind of indoctrinated into the like Western medicine, the institution of Western medicine, where there's always something wrong with you. You always need to look outside of yourself and find an expert in a lab coat, and he can help you, and he can give you the medicine, and he can like fulfill you. But it's really like you said, like our bodies, our natural state is healthy. And I think the biggest thing we can do for ourselves is like almost like get out of our own way. If we can stop poisoning ourselves and stop doing things that are going to break us down, whether that's, repressing emotions or, not dealing with things like you mentioned before. Like sometimes we think our trauma has been healed, but really we just learned how to cope with it and repressed it. And those things, those emotions, like emotions are energy in motion, that if we don't allow it to move through us, that energy has to go somewhere, and it's going to manifest in something negative in our body.
Yeah, and that's true. And like I've been telling people is that I was just dealing with some, like I had not been as sick as much, and but recently I was just, ever since like this past October, I just was like, I was sick in October for like 2 weeks and like I couldn't get out of bed. And then I ended up with like a sinus infection around Christmas time, and like I was having colds, and then I had another sinus infection, and I ended up with like an ear infection, and I hadn't had one in probably like a long time, 7 or 8 years. I can't remember the last time I had one. And I even had to get antibiotics, which I never have done in so long.
Mm.
But it but for me, I realized, okay, what is going on? And I'm like, my food hasn't changed. I mean, of course, I was dealing with a lot of stress, but nothing's changed or anything.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, well, okay, there's some trauma. And the trauma stuff started coming up. I was going to a new church, and I was just crying. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the crying type where I'm like gonna cry to strangers. So this is very weird. And for me, I had to get some outside help and get some outside help and to actually forgive people. And that's the thing I tell people is like, I haven't been sick in a couple months, and I did this thing back in April, and I did it one more time like a couple weeks ago. And I think that's the thing too, is we have to be forgiving people. And one year it might be our trauma that we have to deal with. Like that's my thing this year. Last year it was moving to a new state, getting away from toxic environment and like people and that type of thing. And the year before was grief. I lost my grandmother,
Oh,
and I lost
sorry.
and I lost my dog 12 days before, and I had almost had him for 14 years. So all the way up from 16 all the way up. And so
Sorry.
I did counseling for that. And so I told people, you never know what you're going to have to work on each year, but you could bring in all those other good habits like sleep and eating. Like I'm still doing that. And it was a little off a couple months ago, but it's fine now. But like you bring these habits that you've learned from the previous years and you might work on some other area in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. We always use the analogy of like a spiral staircase.
Yeah.
So like growing and evolving where you're going to go up a level, but you're going to come back around to like the next problem. And like your body is so intuitive, or your soul, or whatever it is that's directing this
Right.
is going to put these things in front of you kind of like when you're ready for them. So it's like you were able to fix your diet and get significantly better with the issues with the fibromyalgia, but there were other things that you hadn't addressed yet. So obviously like that needs to come around, and that next lesson, and every time you go around on the staircase, you're getting this next lesson. I think it's just it's like a beautiful way to look at it.
I think it's beautiful too. And I'm obsessed with what you just said about how you kind of intuitively knew like something was going on. And I love that because I love tapping into that. And I want to get into it because we try to get into that with our clients. And it is kind of funny because I joke that we're like a little bit of a therapist, but it's because we're these questions, did you have a bad day at work? Did something really bad happen with your marriage or your children? Because I feel like the healthier we get, we're more in tune with understanding our body's responses to things. And I picked that up with what you said. And you were like, well, my health's on point, my diet's on point, I'm getting sleep, but you knew that there was something else. And it was that unresolved trauma. And I think that that's so important for people to understand, because going back to just, a couple minutes ago when you said, and we agree completely, the medical industry wants to fit everybody into a box, black or white. And it's not like that. It's everybody's different. Everybody's experiencing different things. So I want to get into kind of a little bit more on like how you tapped into that intuitive nature in yourself. And like, did you have like a moment that you had a light bulb go off, or was it just like over the past 12 years, you just intuitively got more kind of aware of your body's symptoms and like pain as a teacher, or different aspects of your body is teaching you certain things?
Yeah, I think I'm very intuitive as a person and stuff like that. I'm just like, why am I thinking this way? Why am I going through these like things in my life where I'm just like, I don't know why, but I feel like I should do some of these things. Yeah, I just feel like even with this year, like I was like, I don't feel like I'm at the right church. And so that was just a whole experience in itself. And like I'm just very intuitive in the fact of like, okay, if somebody says something to me and it it hits me the wrong way, then I'm like, well, why is that? Why is it? Is it because of that person? Or was it because of something? What do I want from that person? And is it the right thing? And if it's not, maybe it's something I'm dealing with in my childhood. And that's like what happened back in March. Like somebody said some things and I'm like, yeah, like, okay, yeah, I need to deal with some childhood stuff and stuff because I was just like, this is not right. And so for me, it's also being like taking time and actually listening to myself because I'm the one who was like several months ago where I was just doing all the things and I wanted to be busy and I just didn't want to deal with my emotions. I didn't want to be sad. I didn't want to feel lonely. I've only been in this city for a year. And so I was like, who are my real friends here? Like, who are like those people who are going to get me through the hard times? And I just was feeling very lost. And so, like, and it all goes back to like some trauma stuff that I had in my childhood of not feeling worthy, not feeling enough, that type of thing. So that's where it's good to get that outside help because they could tell you things that maybe you're not seeing in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that different perspective of someone who can either open your eyes or have you think in a different way, because it is going to bring it up so much. And I resonate so much with your story. We're very similar in that because my mother was a single mother and my grandmother helped raise me too. And I actually just lost her last year as well.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. It was difficult. So yeah, like, I mean, our stories, our stories are very, very similar. I'd love to dive into actually we're kind of gearing off. I want to go back to the fibromyalgia just a little bit.
Yeah.
When you began cutting out, gluten and soy and dairy, but what were those foods that kind of gave you energy? Did you find anything that was really helping you throughout the day to give you either more energy or less pain? Or have you found that there are foods that I don't want to say like help everybody with fibromyalgia, but may lessen the symptoms?
I feel like staying away from those foods helped, like got rid of the symptoms and stuff like that. And then for me, I tell people just eating whole food, like healthy vegetables, making sure you know where your food's coming from, that type of thing I think is a big thing. I feel like we overcomplicate it and we say, oh, I shouldn't have fruits or I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. It's like just eat food that's from the farmers markets, from produce, like let's not make it complicated because I think that's the problem is like everyone's like, well, I gotta make it complicated. It's like just go back to the basics. Don't have things from a box, don't have things from a can, don't have like, or if you do, look at the ingredients and stuff like that. Not everybody's going to be perfect. And of course, you're going to have things off and stuff like that. But don't beat yourself up for having something that you think is bad.
Absolutely. We're all humans and we like to enjoy ourselves. You don't want to be depriving, if you're at a birthday party and you have a piece of cake, of course, enjoy it. Just don't have the cake 7 days a week. That's when it's going to be detrimental to you. Yeah. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think it's such helpful advice. I think people always are like, tell me what to eat or like give me the diet and like they want the specific prescription.
Yeah.
But just being a little bit more like intuitive and just know if it's real foods, you're probably good. And then you can
and
pay attention to how things make you feel.
Right. If you feeling off and stuff like that, maybe tracking and just seeing what you're eating and seeing maybe where you might have, because I think a lot of times we just forget what we've had the day before, even the night before we forget and we don't. And then and if we track it just a little bit, you don't have to be tracking all the time, but like, okay, I had ice cream the night before. Okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do that or something because I feel horrible the next day or whatever from the sugar content. Like starting to realize how big food plays a part in like how your energy is, How's your sleep? How's your mood? Like, how's your hormones? Like, that plays a big part.
It really does. I could not agree more. And I think one of the biggest challenges, I mean, we face a lot of challenges with our clients, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help and coach them. So I want to do time, because everybody always says, I don't have time to make my own dinners. Like, who has time to make breakfast in the morning? And I'm like, I have time, but it's a priority of mine. And that's what we're helping people teach. But I know that you love teaching, and kind of, I feel like you're an expert on meal prep and giving people great ideas on, how to prep food in bulk, how to make it ahead of time so that it's not chaotic and stressful, because we don't want to add stress in people's life. We want to take it away. So let's kind of get into meal prep, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I tell people, like, look at your week, like what's going to happen next week. So Friday night's a good night. Look to see what's going on and just start to, maybe that's when you decide, okay, I'm going to start to meal prep. Okay. What are the meals that you need to meal prep? You don't have to meal prep every single meal. And I think that's the thing where people get stuck on, is they're like, well, I have to do every single meal and that's a lot of time. And you really don't. And if you're starting in the beginning, then don't start like overhauling everything all at once. Maybe you're just going to do breakfast, and maybe that's like overnight oats that you could prepare real easy. Or maybe it's dinner. Dinner's a big thing if you have kids or you're just working late. Maybe that's the meal that you're like, okay, that one I need to do. And maybe you just pick 2 recipes and make enough of that for the week. I feel like use your time wisely is a big thing. So if you come home with groceries or order groceries, cut up whatever you need to cut up for the meals. And so it's all in your containers, your glass containers. And all you have to do is like throw it on a sheet pan. If real easy, roasted vegetables, doesn't take too, it's all ready, right? You don't have to put it up. I think that's the thing too. Use your time wisely. So if you're cooking and you're spending a couple hours cooking, you could be doing several meals instead of checking our phones.
Yes.
And I'm guilty of this too, where I'll check my phone while something's cooking. Well, you could be using your crock pot. You could be cutting up your vegetables for a different meal, using your stove, using your oven. So like be very strategic and put your phone away for a couple hours.
I was just going to say, we've never really had that advice, but it's amazing. And it's absolutely true, because then you're also present in the moment too, because you want to have, or at least develop, a healthy relationship with food.
Right.
Because I do think that is important when people unconsciously eat, which I think a lot of humans do because they don't understand that food is so important for health, that they just will cook anything and everything, or like you said, eat out of a can or eat out of a box. But when I find it very meditative because I've just been doing it for so long, but I love, like, the kitchen is my like safe space. It's my sacred space. I could spend all, yeah. And it's just cultivating that practice where, I bless my food. We bless our food every day. And I, thank all the animals and even vegetables. I mean, they're for giving us the nutrients that we need. And I think that's so important. And I mean, I love that we're using the term meal prep, but another term that we've kind of incorporated with our clients is leftovers.
Make more than you need, and then you have another meal. It's people, I think, get so, like, the idea of meal prepping can be so daunting, but I think between what Elise just said, they just make one big batch and have leftovers. And then what you shared before, I love the idea of kind of prepping your cooking before, but you don't necessarily have to make everything all at once. Where if you're just cutting up vegetables, getting everything ready for tomorrow's dinner while you're cooking tonight's dinner, you make the process just so much easier. So it's not this overwhelming, oh, I have to cook dinner. And then you end up like thinking about it and then going and getting takeout. Where it's like everything prepped is just, like you said, just throw it on a sheet pan, throw it in the oven.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, is like just making sure you're prepared. And if you have something a certain night, then that's the night that you need to have those meals prepped and ready to go and stuff like that. And if you want to have something and you don't want to cook all the time, making sure you look at the healthier restaurants and just preparing ahead and like looking at the menus online and being like, okay, this is a healthy.
Mhm.
Not, of course, it's not going to be super healthy because it's from a restaurant, right?
Right.
But there are so many health restaurants and stuff nowadays that you don't have to like go to like a fast food place.
There's better choices you can make, and it's so helpful because it's really, really frustrating when you decide like, oh, like I need to get takeout, and then you're scrambling trying to find something that's like relatively healthy, and it can be hard to find. So it's like if you have that idea in the back of your mind or see somewhere and write it down so you remember that like, oh, this place has better options, so that you're not panicking and making panic decisions because they're never
Yeah,
good.
and that's the thing. Have like a little list of 5 different health restaurants, and you can always try new restaurants too, but always have like backups.
Mhm.
And you get into, and it might take a while to find those restaurants that you like, those certain, like what they do with their food, but then actually sit down and enjoy the food, I feel like is a big thing. Like you were talking about saying a blessing over the food and like just thinking about, oh, where did it come from? Like, why, like, who grew my vegetables and like that type of thing, I feel like is so important. Because a lot of times we just, even if we get food like from a restaurant, we don't sit down and we actually enjoy it. We're eating it in the car, we're eating it from the
On the
TV.
go.
Yeah.
We're always, and we're eating it from the computer and we're not actually sitting down and actually enjoying that meal. So then no wonder like an hour later we want ice cream or we want something or we want the chips. It's because our minds didn't register that we've already eaten.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. That's what I was saying. People do it unconsciously. They don't realize it. And yeah. Well, this has been such a fabulous talk. I mean, I'm just blown away by your story and your vulnerability.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this because I think it's going to resonate with a lot of our clients and our listeners, especially people. There are so many people that we know that have fibromyalgia and we've never had a guest on. So I thank you so much for sharing your story and, giving a glimmer of hope that it can be managed with the right healthy lifestyle and diet and the healthy habits that you've incorporated. So, Amanda, we want to thank you so much, but where can people find you if they want to like reach out or work with you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can find me on Facebook. It's Amanda Elise Love, and I have a Facebook group, Physical Emotional Health Secrets. And there's a podcast, my podcast, that's been going for 3 years, and it has almost 135 episodes, and it's all about cooking, but it's also about sleep. I've had trauma experts, mindset experts, because we're holistic beings, and it's all about the relationships, all about our trauma, it's our spirituality, it's our supplements, it's our eating and sleeping. So that's why I created the podcast, because I feel like there's so much out there about your health and you just need to take one step today.
Absolutely. We couldn't agree more. And we're right on the same page. So we thank you again for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and all of these great tips and tools on how to eat healthier. So we dove deep today, I'd say. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.